Hey, you. Yeah, you. You like models and archetypes, right? Of course you do, everybody does. It's like taking that Harry Potter quiz to see which house you're in. You can publicly denounce Harry Potter as childish fantasy garbage, but you and I both know you still took that quiz. So let's create another archetypal model today, dealing with everyone's favorite wholesome mealtime discussion topic, pain. We all respond differently to pain, right? We all have one of those friends who, if they stub their toe, it just absolutely ruins the rest of their day. They'll walk around with a clearly exaggerated limp, and they'll retell the story of that domestic catastrophe in excruciating detail, hoping you'll share in the pain with them, rather than zoning out after the first few seconds to internally debate which new pair of pants you should buy from Amazon. They'll wince audibly every few seconds as they push their cart through the grocery aisles, basically begging you in all but words, "Please feel bad for me and be my slave for the rest of the day." Of course, they'll also cancel their dinner plans with you for that evening so they can go home and ice their foot. Or maybe you're that friend. I won't tell anyone. Or maybe at the other extreme, you've got that coworker. You know the one. Let's call him Dave. Well, this morning, Dave got hit by a bus, but he didn't call out sick or even go to the hospital. Instead, he just got right back to work wrangling spreadsheets as if nothing happened. He probably still even showed up to work before you did. And you only know Dave got hit by a bus on his way in because you asked. And you only asked because his pants were a little bit scuffed and he's missing a shoe. And of course the dried blood on the side of his face. Now don't bother with logically suggesting that he leave work right now and go to a clinic. You'll get responses like, "Nah, dude, I'm fine." Or, "If you think this is bad, you should see the bus." Or, "We're still going to go lift during lunch, right?" No, Dave, we're not going to lift. You're going to wake up Wednesday and you won't be able to turn your neck or something. So now you're going to call out sick and go to the doctor. So you'll just disappear for like the next 3 weeks, and guess who will be doing your job while you're gone? Of course, our reservoirs of resource, like health, wealth, and emotional stability, may help us bounce back from setbacks more readily. But there are other factors as well that may push you towards one of these two extreme conditions exampled here. So how do you deal with pain? Whether physical, emotional, or psychological, we all respond a little bit differently. Some of us become incessantly preoccupied with it, and some of us ignore it until it becomes impossible to ignore. And some of us fall in between these two extremes. Now, some of us like stories, and some of us like pictures and videos, but I was trained as an engineer, so I love graphs. And what better way to discuss something so personal and experiential as pain than with a scatter plot or a histogram where the limit of personalization is deciding which plot gets blue data points and which gets green ones. So let's make a pain graph. We'll map the perceived pain on the x-axis of our graph and the actual harm on the y-axis, both from a 0 to 10 scale. And there are 3 generalized responses that we can have to an adverse event, though in reality your individual pain response could fall anywhere in between any of these. Let's consider 3 possible archetypes: the linear response, or the realists, the exponential response, or the worriers, and the logarithmic response, or the masochists. For this model, let's consider that all archetypes converge at 0 and 10, but everywhere else they differ. That is, when harm is maximal, we all perceive pain to be a 10, and when harm is non-existent, we all perceive pain to be a 0. By the way, if this is not you, if your 0 is actually a 3 or a 6, then unfortunately we've exceeded my level of expertise. You'll need to seek someone way more competent than me, maybe a psychiatrist, a chiropractor, a dietitian, or an exorcist. Now, when it comes to that x-axis scale, the perceived pain, it can be tricky and temperamental to evaluate. It's, like that question that feels like you're throwing darts at the wall when your doctor asks you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does it hurt? Like, bro, it's 2025. Can you please just scan me with your tricorder and tell me what's wrong with me? But in addition to physical discomfort that we might feel in the moment, pain can also include fear and anxiety around potential future threats. That emotional reaction can even feed back to amplify physical perceptions of pain in the present. It's based on our expectation of the threat caused by a harm that has been done to us or may be done to us in the future. Because our emotions and expectations are so intertwined with our sensations of pain, I'm not going to separate them here. We'll be referring to pain in the broadest sense possible, including both physical and emotional distress in the present and anxieties or anticipation of future distress. And of course, disclaimer warning, I am not a medical doctor and this content is only my opinion. For actual diagnosis or treatment, please seek professional medical assistance. With that out of the way, first we'll cover the linear response, or the realists. This response is prized for its accuracy. All problems that one faces are regarded with the most realistic evaluation of the threat that they actually pose. Now, I get what you're thinking. It's like if we take a poll, paradoxically way more than 50% of people will claim to be a little bit smarter than average, a little bit better looking than average, a little bit kinder than average, and a little bit better at Mario Kart than average. And if we similarly poll for optimism and pessimism, I suspect 90% of us consider ourselves realists, 10% pessimists, and literally no one claims optimism, because to do so is to culturally eviscerate yourself because everything is doom, gloom, and suffering right now, and how dare you have the privilege to feel otherwise. That said, we are not all realists, even if we would like to be. There are advantages to both optimism and pessimism, and furthermore, we are going way off subject. Why are you nitpicking my verbiage? Just listen silently and politely, please. Now, when it comes to pain response, realists are similarly very good at interpreting information without bias, but there are some caveats. First, good information needs to be available. Without reliable information about the dangers that one faces, a skilled realist will and should claim uncertainty, a virtue we'll undoubtedly discuss another time. Secondly, even when good information is available, the realist will need to be sufficiently knowledgeable to interpret it accurately. If I'm evaluating investment risks, I will need expertise in economics or finance to reliably utilize available information. If I'm evaluating which foods at the grocery stores are healthy and which should be avoided, I will similarly need some knowledge of nutrition or human biology in order to draw accurate conclusions. More so than worriers or masochists who rely on other mechanisms to deal with pain and threat, realists need expertise to support good decision-making. While this expertise can be outsourced, for example to trusted authorities, websites, or LLMs, realists will still require the mental calm and unbiased perception to interpret this information wisely. Fortunately, this is what realists, when functioning at their best, do well. Some painful injuries, like, say, stepping on a Lego left lying around the house like you live in a World War I-era minefield, well, the realist knows that these injuries pose negligible long-term risk. Well, except to your son, who's absolutely grounded for the next 2 weeks. But this injury will fully heal without intervention, so if you're a realist, you may be able to ignore the pain and go about your business. Your son certainly hopes so anyways. But when an ill feeling reasonably indicates risk of a more serious condition, a realist will become more sensitive to the pain and may be motivated to take corrective action. Now let's discuss the exponential response to pain, or the worriers. Now, nobody wants to be a worrier, and I've chosen that name for this archetype based on what can happen when it's implemented poorly. But worriers, when worrying well, can do a lot of things right. Worriers are naturally vigilant, always on the lookout for threats, and often the first to spot them and be ready to deal with them. In fact, to reframe this archetype in a more positive light, we could refer to them as vigilants, not to be confused with vigilantes. Now, vigilants will be the first to notice a mild or unusual pain or sensation or change in how their body is feeling or functioning, and in our modern medical landscape, this can lead to an early diagnosis of what might otherwise be a costly or even fatal malady when diagnosed too late. Vigilants, by necessity, have a detailed picture of their internal state, and sometimes, unfortunately for you if you're close to them, your internal state, and they will readily let you know about everything that's wrong with you, because they love you. As a side effect, vigilants often function well in really sensitive situations where small deviations from the norm or minor neglected details can have catastrophic consequences, like in military, space exploration, or medical professions. Unfortunately, not all vigilants or worriers worry well, though perhaps they can with more training, development, or healing. Worrying, by its very nature, can amplify pain. Let's say I break my leg. I'll probably feel the pain of that injury more acutely if I can't stop thinking about the impact of current political policies on my healthcare costs, whether I'll ever play pickleball again, or the tiny chance that a bone splinter might cause a blood clot 20 years from now and I could just randomly drop dead without warning. Life sucks sometimes, and none feel this suckitude more intensely than the vigilant. Worry can help us catch and fix problems before they get bigger, but it can also leave us paralyzed when faced with unsolvable problems or uncertainties too great to predict reliably. The primary challenge that a vigilant will face is knowing when worry is useful, when worry can be converted into positive action, and when, conversely, it just amplifies our pains or our fears without gain. Okay, let's talk about those masochists who exhibit a logarithmic response to pain. Now, our society glorifies pain tolerance. You know, those stereotypical action hero movies where, the hero just gets shot in the chest, but then they just kind of seem to not mind too much, and they just go about their merry way, kung-fuing people and jumping off of buildings and whatnot, like it's just a regular Tuesday afternoon and they have 2 hours to kill before yoga class. Just ask anyone that you suspect might have a little bit more testosterone than they really need. They'll say, "Yep, that's me, I could do that. Actually, I've basically been shot before, it wasn't even that painful." No, Dave, you haven't been shot, you just played paintball once, like 18 years ago. The potential benefits of a high pain tolerance are fairly obvious and generally well respected. You can work harder, exercise harder, and do all sorts of other PG-rated activities harder. And you can feel good about yourself by tolerating pain or discomfort to help out others who might be unwilling or unable to tolerate that adversity themselves. Now you're an action movie hero and a martyr. Or so this is the ideal. While tolerating discomfort might be an important feature of our idolized high achievers and heroes, it is not the only requirement. But we're talking about pain today, not achievement, and there are plenty of ways in which ignorance of pain and discomfort can sabotage our attempts to live a healthy, productive life. First, one necessary outcome of the logarithmic response to pain is that you'll have very little space between everything's fine and oh my god, everything's on fire. As we mentioned previously, an early diagnosis often yields a more effective treatment. Or an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or whatever else your mother might have told you when you were at the prime age of 16, and thus least likely to listen to her. By neglecting pain, in some ways these wannabe stoics are prioritizing short-term performance at the expense of long-term health. In small doses and at the right times, this behavior can help you outcompete others and even push yourself to higher limits, rewarding you with self-esteem and self-sufficiency. But when applied poorly, this archetype may stubbornly refuse treatment even as they succumb to whatever physical or psychological trauma they're dealing with. I'm sure you know at least one person who's like this. And they know that you know because you probably remind them continually to get help. Or maybe you're that person and I'm just one more random stranger unnecessarily calling you out on your toxic masochism. Okay, so we've neatly packaged our pain responses into these 3 definitive archetypes. So once you've figured out whether you're a realist, a worrier, or a masochist, is that it? Problem solved? Welcome to your new blissful pain-free life? Well, not quite, and if that were the case, I would be charging a $250 yearly subscription for this service. Unfortunately, most self-development work takes time, and while understanding our problems is not the same as solving them, it is a pretty good place to start. Pain is difficult to diagnose and even more difficult to conquer, even with the help of medical and mental health professionals. I am neither of those things, and further, this simplified model of 3 different pain responses can't be monolithically applied as a label even to an individual. I may deal with some types of pain linearly and others exponentially, for example. The goal of this talk is to help provide some perspective on how you, as a unique individual, relate to pain, to identify areas where you might struggle so that you can be better aware of them. After all, it's hard to solve a problem that isn't sufficiently well defined. And to better understand your areas of natural skill that you can utilize to your advantage when dealing with pain and adversity.